It's Car Con Carne. Let's eat in the car. It's Car Con Carne. And now here's the star of our show, James Van Alstyne.
Didn't feel like it.
Yeah.
And here we are. It's Car Con Carne. Welcome back to the working week. You know, up until this weekend, we said a lot of, oh man, it sucks being stuck at home. This is really rough. Now we really are stuck at home. If we wanted to, we couldn't exit the front doors because it's piled with snow right outside the door.
Yes.
What a night. It is Monday. I'm joined tonight by longtime pal, independent comic artist Sal Abbinanti, who is a fantastic person who is Kickstartering his new graphic novel release, The Hostage. It has hit its goal, and now it's all just up for grabs. Get yourself a copy. Get some of these cool extras. It's on Kickstarter for the next week plus. Sal, always good to see you.
James, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
In the post or the text I used to promote this on social, I included the quote from your graphic novel. This hostage was not born. It was not sent. It was the dream of the kids that never felt sorry for themselves. I love that line.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was important that I didn't, that it wasn't like this was just another comic book that like, oh, it's like Ghost Rider, it's like the Punisher, where like this superhero came and saved the day. So, and these kids they're tough kids. They're street kids, and living on the street kind of it hones their survival skills to a sharp edge, you know, so they don't really want you to feel sorry for them. They're tough kids.
So the book, The Hostage, it's about the children of Rio de Janeiro. These are street kids who are victims of abject poverty and violence, and they join together to summon the hostage to protect them. We'll get into this, and we've got images from the graphic novel to go deep into. Whenever I prepare for an interview, Sal, I go back into my notes, especially if it's someone who I've spoken with before, and I see if I have any notes from the last time to key off of. The last time I interviewed you, I didn't realize it was this long ago, was about 8 years ago. I was on WGN radio doing a talk show there. We did an interview then. We talked about this book 8 years ago in that interview. You said you were working on a book about the kids in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah.
That was 8 years ago. When I opened up my notes, my mind was kind of blown, like, oh my God, here we are 8 years later and it's finally out.
It's been, I mean, it's one of those things I started when I was in college. I started when I got back from Rio in, you know, God help us, 1989, 1990. And it was something that James, we're just, you know, in life, there are some things you just can't unsee. And I couldn't unsee a lot of the things that I saw when I was in Rio. And so I knew I wanted to do something with it as an artist, but yet producing an indie book back then wasn't like it is now. It's much easier to do it now than it was then, because there's more, you know, desktop publishing has made it a lot easier. You could go to a printer now and get 50 copies. You don't have to do a print run of, you know, 100,000.
Right.
So I didn't, you know, and I was working in advertising at the time when I came back to Chicago, because, you know, I got sick of Top Ramen. You like to eat 3 times a day. You know, I couldn't live on trail mix and Jell-O anymore. So I was working at Leo Burnett and, you know, cranking on the samples at the same time. But when I wanted to get into comics, I wanted to get into mainstream comics. There was just no way, man. They were not having me because my style was not, you know, commercial comics, commercial, you know, house style. So I knew that, look, I either was going to be an indie guy or I just was going to go back to drawing storyboards. So I just said, you know what, the comic thing was something that I had to do. I didn't really want to do it. I had to do it.
I get that.
So when you decide you're going to do something indie, the most important thing I felt was to do something personal, do something that's a personal experience, because you're going to have way more leverage on that emotionally than you would if it's just a guy with a cape or a dog that's got a patch or a pirate, or, you know what I mean? Whatever your story is, I found that, look, my style is effed up. It's not mainstream. So I want to do something that resonated with an emotional experience of mine. And that's where Hostage came from.
And the epilogue of this book, just to jump right to the end, you recount your personal, I mean, it is about your personal reasons and motivations, and it really provides the background for what we read up until that point.
I wasn't sure if I was going to you write a letter? Do you do an intro? Do you do it? I didn't want it to be heavy handed, but yet I just kind of wanted to imply, look, I didn't use these kids and this horrible situation of these kids living in the streets as a narrative just for another comic book. Like, I know, James, we'll use street kids and, we'll give them a dog. That was not my motivation. My motivation was, this was an experience, and this was something that I felt like, man, I want to do this as a personal comic, as a personal story. And you see my style. It's not, it's not Little Lotta. It's not, it's not Archie and Jughead.
No.
So it kind of fitted that.
Well, and early on, it was almost kind of a meta moment in The Hostage. One of the characters says, "No birthday parties, new shoes or school. No one with a cape is coming to save us." That was you saying, yeah, this isn't your typical comic book you're reading here. This is a totally different experience.
Yeah, it's important that, because when you see what other countries do with comic books, the vast majority of what they're doing with them are not guys in capes. In fact, that's a term they use in Europe for American comics. They say guys in capes. Most of the comics you see in Asia, in Italy, in Germany, in France, and the European publishers aren't superheroes. It's Westerns, it's science fiction, it's just day-to-day life stories, it's personal experiences. It's things that don't have anything to do with, the guys screaming. Not that there's anything wrong with superheroes, because that was my love, with superheroes. But I wanted it to be clear, like, this was not another superhero comic.
It is clearly not. Let's show some of the images from the book. Again, this is on Kickstarter right now. What's the end date for the Kickstarter?
We were about 10 days out. Yeah, it's going really well. I'm very, very excited. I couldn't be. The response has been tremendous.
I love that. All right, so we're going to go. I think to help tell the story of The Hostage, we'll go through some of the images and talk about some of the background, and this will also help shine a light on your very distinct style. And really, when it comes to your style, you're right. You're not a mainstream comic style creator, but isn't that a great thing? Like having your, like, there's the Abbinanti style. Like you are your own style. I can't think of anyone who looks like what you do or whose work looks like what you do.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's a blessing if people like it and it succeeds. It's a curse when you go to editors and they go, what's wrong with you? Are you crazy? or your style, is too disturbing, was what I used to get. And it just becomes one of those things where after you reach a certain age, you realize, hey, look, this is who I am and this is what I do. And I really tried to draw more of a house style. I tried to draw, a straightforward commercial type comic books, and it just never turned out that way. It always turned out to look, more expressionist, more abstract.
And as we go through these images from your graphic novel, a couple things that I think will be instantly apparent to people: your use of colors. I think the colors are a very striking aspect of what you're doing here, and the variety of mediums you use to illustrate the book. At one point, you go from full color to what looks like just straight pencils, like pens and markers and watercolors. It's an interesting mix of styles throughout the book.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes from, there were artists that I admired, growing up, who were tremendous draftsmen. Neil Adams and John Romita, or Jack Kirby or John Buscema, or even the guys I work with like Alex Ross and Bill Sienkiewicz. And these guys are tremendous draftsmen. They're great artists with the brush and with, their technical skills. I was never that artist. I was a dirty artist dirty style, because when you're in advertising, it's all about speed. It's all about, you use whatever. You use markers, you use pens, you use turpentines, you use lighter fluid, you use use spatterings, because you gotta reach your deadlines. And so when I approached The Hostage in my own style, and I didn't want to use a computer colorist, I felt it was important to just let it fly, to just say, hey man, I don't really have to answer to an editor. Right. Let me just do my own thing.
And given the subject matter and given the stuff, I mean, this is a fictional story, but there is some veracity to the story you're telling. It just the lives that these kids lead. Isn't it important to keep this kind of raw and
Yeah, no,
street level, for lack of a better way of saying it?
Absolutely. I mean, there were parts that I didn't really show it to anybody for a long time because I felt it was important for me to finish it, because it's kind of a thing that artists do where if you talk about a project too much, it almost replaces doing it. You know, you don't really, you almost complete it in your head, but you never actually get it done. So when I knew I had to finish it and I knew I wanted to get it done, I felt I wanted to keep pushing it and trying to do different things and trying to make it a little more raw with the colors and with the expressions of line and different things like that, because I didn't really have anything to lose. I knew it was my own project. I didn't have an editor or a publisher to answer to, you know, and those guys weren't going to hire me. So there's a tremendous amount of freedom when you know these idiots aren't going to hire you. So
we're looking at, is this
that's the end papers of the that would be the opening of the book before you get to the guts of it.
So this is a straight Will Eisner homage, isn't it?
More or less. Yeah. I kind of got the idea a little bit from the old movie posters of the 70s, you know, when you'd walk by the Uptown Theater and you had the Dirty Dozen or, you know, the Iger Sanction. You always had the characters jumping out from on top of the logo or from, you know, and that's kind of, you know, I always remember how powerful those great movie posters were.
And again, those colors just pop.
Yeah.
I want to start with this image. This is one of my favorite images, or one of the more resonant images from the book to me. Just this predominantly black and white design and the very clear blood-soaked bodies in the street. In the book, it says just short of too late. That's the line that kind of hovers above this one. This looks like it took forever to do.
Yeah, well, the favelas they're up in the hills of Rio, and they're a very organic feel because they just kind of build upon themselves. There's not a lot of straight lines. There's not a lot of straight perspectives. They're not really designed or laid out to be put up. So I wanted to just imply the type of chaos that's felt with the favelas, and yet the crazier it gets, the more your eye needs a place to go and a place to rest. So I wanted it to be the focus, not to be on the architecture as much as the chaos of what these kids endure living in the favelas.
One of the things I'm excited about when I do get that hardcover delivered, which, I mean, you've secured the Kickstarter, it's going to happen. I really want to spend time with these pages in front of me. I mean, because as I look at it on my screen, like every window, every space is occupied by different colors and things. Up in the top center, there are stars behind some of the windows or holes. This is such a dense amount of work here that I think this rewards repeat viewing.
Well, it's also a labor of love. I mean, I felt that it was important for me to go in and go to town on certain things, not just for the sake of being redundant, but I just felt, you know, when I experienced the favelas in person for the first time, it was unlike anything. They were like, they go straight up. They're on top of you. I mean, it was like something out of a German, you know, expressionist film. It was something very, and at night they change shape altogether. They're almost like a living thing standing over you. So I felt it was important to almost make the landscape was a character in the book. And that's kind of this was implied by.
And here are the kids. We steal anything of value. We do not have anywhere to eat. We do not have anywhere to sleep. We do not have anywhere to stay. That is why we steal. There's so much going on, particularly in that left panel, the faces kind of blending into the environment. Things look upside down. And explain what we're looking at here.
Yeah, the left side is, if you look at the bottom, they're kind of, those are the kids, the silhouette of the kids. And that's the streets of Rio. That's the streets of the favelas, where there's a lot of architecture that's built on top of old architecture, and there's a lot of old billboards, and there's a lot of old street signs that are still there that are covered in different stages of disrepair. And again, I just wanted to imply there's this beauty, this organic kind of beauty where there's almost this overgrowth like you'd find in the Amazon, but yet it's urban. And then, the drawing, it's funny because the drawing on the right, the kids, the main shot of the kids there, that's something that was one of the original drawings I did, conceptual drawings of them, like over 10 years ago. And It was just, and I just kind of wanted to, again, they're, when you walk down the street and you see these kids, they're very intimidating. They're not, but even though they're young, the saddest thing about a lot of the street kids in Brazil is that they're under the age of 10. We think of our homeless situation in the U.S. as it's mostly grown-ups. When you walk down the street, you see, guys that can defend themselves. These are kids. These are all, small kids that are literally sleeping in doorways, hundreds and thousands of them everywhere.
I find the backstory to this so interesting. Just, you saw this, you couldn't unsee it, and it left such a mark on you. You found a way many years later to finally tell this story, to find a way to share this story, share some of the cultural aspects of Rio in this. You had a burn on to make this happen. And I think that's the beauty of the independent spirit, really, is just finding a way.
Yeah. I worried, that I'm not from Brazil. People are always going to criticize when you're not from somewhere that you're doing something about their culture or their city or their problem. And I didn't want to come across as the ugly American, poking fun or criticizing Rio. That was not my intention at all. It was just that I just felt, that there was something there that these kids that spoke to me, that I felt as an artist, it was important for me to do something, other than guys with capes, to do a book other than, Batman, Wolverine.
Interesting parallel in the book. You've got the kids who are these orphans living in the street. Here are the monkeys who come down from the trees. You talk about this in the book. They're basically orphans too. They're forced from the rainforest, forced to live in the street. Just interesting parallel. It's not just the kids who are suffering or thrust into bad circumstance.
Yeah, there's a lot of them they're in Rio. You don't see a lot of them because they never really come down to the ground a lot except to get food. But in a lot of the buildings that are close to the edge of the cliffs and areas of Rio where there's a lot of trees, at night you hear them and you see them, and you don't mess with them, because I've seen tourists try to feed them, and they'll come down and they're not happy customers. They're not your friendly little let's feed the monkeys. So I felt it was kind of important to include them.
And these are some disturbing images. Like I don't want this to be the last thing I look at before I go to bed.
Yeah, it's like, that's like I said. Imagine showing this to editors. They're like, Sal, what are you talking about? You want to draw Luke Cage? Were you crazy? They're like, yeah. And
all right, so
just markers. That's straight markers, flare pens. Even like a lot of highlighters that I find at like the grocery store. I used highlighters, and then I went in and I had my letter guy go in and superimpose the map of Brazil. I wanted to hand draw it, but I wanted the clarity this is at the beginning of the book. I really wanted to ground the reader in the idea that, no, this is Brazil you're looking at.
I like the contrast too.
Yeah.
Between your image and the very clean map image. Christ the Redeemer, obviously, when a lot of us think of Rio, we think of Christ the Redeemer. That's this big looming presence in Rio. And certainly we see that image throughout the book. Talk to me about the importance of this icon.
It's not it wasn't meant to be terribly religious, but it's hard to not be in Rio and not have that statue not have an effect off of. It's over your shoulder everywhere you go. It's this enormous presence. And there's this, I just always remembered the line from the Bible, about, false idols or statues, that they have eyes, but they can't see. So that kind of is how I felt about whenever I would talk to the people in Brazil or friends of mine that lived there. And I'd say, hey guys, how do you deal with this every day? how do you walk by these kids and still, doesn't it eat at you? Doesn't it tear at you? And they're like, you just kind of have to almost unsee it. You have to go about your day and just almost pretend like they're not there. So that was kind of the sad reality of what I experienced over a lot of people that, are there, that they feel for these kids, but yet the problem has just become out of control. And I've heard it's much worse now. I was there in the late 80s. So I've only heard through people I know that have been there and people I've talked to that the homeless situation with these kids and the violence has just gotten much worse. So this is a puddle. That would be a puddle of blood and the reflection of the Christ the Redeemer. And then
This is the police, right?
Yes. Well, the police. What happened? There's another in chapter 2. There's also an unfortunate underbelly in the culture of the homeless kids that they sniff glue to kill their hunger pains. They do drugs. They do things to kind of alter their reality, to numb their reality, to make their day-to-day existence more tolerable. So the local police, are starting to move into the favelas more now to eradicate these kids, because a lot of the homeless kids are, it's gang related and there's a lot of violence. So my idea with this was a lot of the reality of these kids is altered. Their perception of the world is altered by these drugs that they do, by this glue that they sniff. They sniff this horrible glue that kind of kills their brain cells and alters how they see things. So to me, I didn't want to perceive the police just as the police coming in and they look like, the men in blue. I wanted them to come, appear the way they would appear to kids that have been living in the streets and they've been doing drugs. And this is kind of their warped reality of their day-to-day battle with these cops.
Again, as we're looking at these images, the colors and the time spent, the little details, once your eye adjusts to a lot of your panels and pages, Sal, there's so much stuff to zero in on. It's kind of exciting. Am I looking at watercolors on the left?
Yeah, well, yeah, that would be watercolors. That would be colored pencil. It would be a lot of spattering. It would be use of markers. I would go in first with markers and some varnishes, some matte varnishes, and lay them flat, and then lay paint on top of that, and just experiment and use, spraying of varnishes on it to get kind of a muted effect of things. But then also it was important for me for the colors. I wanted it to be a character in the book as well. The bright colors, the neon colors.
Love it. Now, this is not the finished version of what we see in the book. This is a little touched up in the finished version. This looks like maybe a...
Yeah, it's finished. There would be blood next to the child. Yeah. On the right. That's a silhouette of the kid on the right, on the bottom right there, standing in front of. There's a lot of these beautiful old churches that are abandoned or that are boarded up and they're not in use anymore in Rio de Janeiro. And as you pass a lot of them, they're these kind of haunted. There's squatters living in them, in some of them, and they're kind of these relics of the past. And there's a lot of homeless people living in them, and a lot of the kids hang out there and they gather there. So this was a sequence that I just felt was important to kind of go to town on and convey some of the old religions of the past that are kind of now dying.
And the text in the finished version, they say if a child dies in an evil place, their soul will wander in the dark forever, never finding his ancestors. Yeah. This is like your George Perez moment here. This big amount of detail everywhere you look.
Yeah, you don't want to kind of fall in love with yourself when you do stuff like this, because you have the tendency to want to, I know what I'll do, and it's the Kree-Skrull War, and draw 1,000 ships. But this was originally I wanted the book to be black and white, but then as I moved forward, I felt it was more important. The colors were more important, but this was a double page spread that I finished and I really liked it and I wanted to include it. So it's almost a rest stop moment after one of the children is murdered, that he doesn't know what to do with his friend. So he leaves him on the stairs of the church, kind of a la James Cagney in Public Enemy.
I love this spread right here. And you just said something that I think is worth talking about, that you planned for this, or in your head, you thought this would be black and white. And through the process of just creating, building, you decided, well, I'll play with color. And now here we are at the finish line, and color is such an important part of this finished product. Like, it's just interesting how creativity evolves and directions change the more you dig into it, the more you immerse yourself into your project.
Well, that's what's great about being an indie, artist, is that you just feel like, you know what, there really aren't any rules. You just let it fly. And as long as it fits what you're doing, and there's a narrative throughout the center of it that tells the story, that's not, crazy visuals and all this is great. But if there's not a single narrative that you're able to follow, it just becomes too chaotic. And I was on the edges of some of that for a while, where I thought, man, this is great, but if they don't know what's going on, it defeats the purpose. So right. This I felt was important, that, you know what, I'm going to leave this in black and white, because it allows the reader kind of a place to rest, for the story to kind of stop, and things to kind of cool off a little bit.
This is actually, these are 2 pages we're looking at.
Yeah, that is that's a single page spread where the police are moving in, and they shoot a lot of tear gas in, and that's kind of the smoke going down the alleyway, one of the narrower streets in Rio, and where the hostage is on the other side of the smoke. Yeah, and that would be him coming out of the other side of the smoke.
Again, the use of color, the greens, the purples, the reds, the yellows. One thing I noticed throughout the graphic novel is these old signs or images that are kind of plastered into the background. What are these things you grabbed? Are these signs from Rio? Did you recreate them? Did you grab them from somewhere else?
I found that, older parts of Rio that I was in, there was, again, a lot of this fascinating old billboards that were still kind of stuck or trapped between buildings or trapped underneath stucco. And I saw some of them, and they were these great old, 50s, 60s, 70s rerun theaters, that we used to have when we were growing up. You had a lot of these second run theaters. Mm-hmm. And so when I started to research the hostage, to get source material, I found a lot of libraries were throwing everything away. In about 10 years ago, all the libraries just decided, we're throwing all these art books out. We're throwing all these newspapers out. So I found an old library in Rio that was throwing out all their newspapers from the 50s and 60s. So I for like $100, they sent me like 3 big boxes of these old, yellow newspapers from Rio. And they had these great old movies. I remember when we were growing up, James, when you wanted to see a movie, you had to look in the paper to see what was playing at the Uptown or what was playing at,
Absolutely.
And that's what these were. There were a lot of these old movie advertisements. And so I thought it was important for me to also include things that were not in English, so that people who are from Brazil or Brazilian people that might want to read it would see it and recognize it right away.
I like I said, I noticed this stuff throughout the book, and it's subtle in a lot of places, but it's something that I think truly adds to the texture and feel of what you've created here.
A lot of it too was out of a sense of respect. This is Bill Sienkiewicz. Bill was always he's a dear friend of mine, and we've worked together for a long time. And when I when I was going to tackle the book, I said, Bill, I really would like you to do something. And he said, sure. And he's like, well, what do you want? And I said, look, you know what? I'm going to send you the book. And I've learned never to art direct, especially guys like Bill Sienkiewicz. You don't really want to art direct too much. And I said, Bill, this is what the story's about. It's in Rio de Janeiro, and it's the street kids, and it's the favelas. And he goes, okay, I got it. I know it. I got something. And then this is inevitably what he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, oh, it's terrible, Bill. And I was like, are you kidding? I'm like, so it was important for me to have, to see what other artists might think of or flesh it out. So I was really fortunate to have Bill and a few other friends of mine that are artists contribute.
What's interesting about this thing that Sienkiewicz did, it really did capture your story. It captured everything. Like, it's a great representation. It's not so far afield or off the reservation that it doesn't make sense. Like, this is so consistent with the book. It's just, he did it. Not surprisingly, he's Bill Sienkiewicz, but he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, he's tremendous, and I have to say I owe a tremendous debt to him, because I've learned so much from him as an artist. Just not so much, nuts and bolts or recipes, but just philosophy wise, to always try to surprise yourself, to always try to stretch what you're doing, to never feel that you need a straightforward narrative, to tell a story. And that's kind of always, that had a profound effect on me. When I started to show him some of the pages and I said, Bill, what do you think? And he was like, you stretch it more, exaggerate more. Don't ever be afraid to do more. And I thought, you know what, as an artist, it's like, it's true, because at the end of the day, it's your name on it. If they hate it, it's because, Sal doesn't know what he's doing. If they love it, it's because, Sal's a weird artist. So.
And I'm going to share the screen of what your Kickstarter page looks like. So here it is. This is the Kickstarter. It is live until the 25th, next week. There's a video where we can see you talk some more. Let's talk about what people can get. Let's drive some business to the hostage here.
Yeah, well, thank you. I wasn't really, this is my first Kickstarter. I didn't know a lot about it, but I knew that when I was going to put the hostage out, it was pre-COVID. And then once COVID hit, I thought, wow, comic stores are not open and things are not the way they were. But I saw what a lot of indie creators were doing on Kickstarter, that you're able to show a video and describe what you're doing, and to show images, and to let people who want to possibly get, support, they can kind of, they can walk through the book a little bit. They can dip their toe in a little bit. So, but you also need perks and stretch goals. So I felt it was important to get artists whose style was more indicative of the story or of the subject matter. So Alex Ross was great enough to contribute a piece, and Jeff Darrow, just tremendously talented artist. And of course, Bill Sienkiewicz and Eric Powell, and the legendary famous monster artist, San Julian.
It's amazing.
I was always a huge fan of it. He was one of the first guys, that when I described it to him, he's like, yeah, sure. Great, Sal. I know what you want. And I'm like, okay. And then Jeffrey Allen Love is another artist who has a very unique graphic style that I was drawn to when I first ran across him. So there's perks, there's lithograph packages, there's sketchbook packages. I offer the book as a PDF in English and in Portuguese.
That's a nice touch.
Brazilian readers want to read it. But I also felt it was important to offer original art by me. So if you bought a version of the book, it comes with a hand-drawn, hand-painting, not just, something that's mailed in, but, cards that I've spent a lot of time on.
I love that.
Yeah, it's important. It was important to me that if somebody wanted to support this book, especially an indie title, because anything indie is tough, because most comic stores, unfortunately, don't buy into independent comics. And most comic fans, there's a lot of brand loyalty with comics. Everybody has their Newports and their Cools and their Marlboro, and their Viceroy. They don't want to buy into, independent titles. So for someone to give an indie title a break, I just wanted to show my appreciation.
I love that. So you see all the different rewards as we're scrolling through the Kickstarter here. We talked about the lithographs. There's the Alex Ross lithograph, limited. Only a handful of those remain. We showed the Sienkiewicz lithograph. That is available. Just really cool collectible stuff. And this is one of a kind stuff. The book itself, real simple. The hardcover edition, a value at any price sale, $35. Come on. We were starting out originally as a soft cover, but because we hit our goal, what's really cool, the thing that excited me most about hitting the goal, not only being able to put the book out, was we were able to do it as a hardcover slipcase. So it went from being a soft cover regular graphic novel to a hardcover, slipcase with a lot of extras, and a lot of the presentation of it is really the paper and the printer we're using is it's great stuff. So I'm very excited about that. A topic I find myself coming back to a lot on this podcast is entrepreneurship. And I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about here. I mean, this is all about the hustle. This is all about making stuff happen for yourself. And I think there's a lesson that we can all learn from.
COVID, James, COVID forced us all to pivot, but yet we still have our passions. But what I noticed a lot of comic creators doing we're doing this. And as a comic creator or as a musician or as an artist, what you want more than anything is that one-to-one. You want that ability to talk to the consumer, to talk to the art, to talk to people who are into it, and be able to not have to go through a publisher or to go through, when I put out, Atomica, you just basically you ran an ad in Diamond and you waited for your orders to come. And unless you went to cons and met people directly and were able to talk to them, you weren't able to meet the fan base. You weren't able to kind of let the fan base look at your work and give it a shot and make a determination for themselves. But what's cool about Kickstarter is that comic people you're getting it directly from the creator. And when I started to see Todd McFarlane and Brian Polito and Jimmy Palmiotti and the guys over at Boom Studios putting their stuff on with Keanu Reeves as the subject matter, I'm like, they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because of COVID. Your operating procedure is everything is thrown out the window. There are no more rules anymore. So I was very reluctant with Kickstarter because, Kickstarter was like outside of my comfort zone. But once I saw you can make a video, you could show the work, you can give samples of the work, and I could actually kind of present it to you in a more effective way, I'm like, you know what, let's try it, because I'm an indie creator. And with indie creators, it's all about the hustle. Yes. Because if you get into being an indie comic artist, James, for the money, God bless you. Because, you better do it because you love it.
It would be like getting into podcasting for the money.
Or you better do it because you love it. Absolutely. I mean, because being an artist, and to me, an artist is a musician, an architect, a dancer, a writer. What you do, you're an artist because you have to have a creative side. You have to have a sense of a creative flow or a need to do what you do, or you wouldn't do it.
Right.
But if you're not gonna, it's like running off and joining the circus. The circus doesn't need you, man. You need the circus. You get there and the circus is like, we're full. But, you have to be, and I have to do this. I don't really have a choice.
You need the circus. Things are so different now. We've known each other for many years. In the time we've known each other, things have changed so much. And you mentioned how comic shops are different. How different are they now? I mean, in a world where people read a lot of comics on their tablets, you can download graphic novels on Hoopla and Amazon Prime and everything else. How important is the role of the local shop?
For me, it's paramount. The same with the role of the indie creator. For me, comics needs indie creators and indie writers more than ever, because I believe that you look at what, no offense to Marvel and DC, what they're creating is becoming narrower and narrower. It's becoming license driven. They care very much about the characters. They're always going to care more about Batman than they do about the artist that's drawing Batman. The local comic stores, unfortunately, print is print, and comics are getting kind of squeezed in from all sides because people are now under the delusion that because Avengers makes $1 billion, that somehow that trickles down into comics. And it's unfortunate, it just doesn't. There are not enough people going to comic shows that are actually buying comics. They've become entertainment shows, which is fine. I mean, we used to bitch when we had to go to the Holiday Inn basement, and flip through quarter boxes to find back issues of the Eternals. And now you've got Comic-Con, which is, like the Cannes Film Festival. That's terrific. That's putting a lot of spotlight on the licensed stuff, on the big guys. But in my opinion, the true creators, true artists, true writers that are out there now, we need you, man. I mean, we need indie titles. We need new characters because Warner Brothers is just going to keep going to Batman. And the Avengers have become, Marvel's become that 900-pound gorilla where they're just going to keep going to the well until the well is like what they did with Star Wars. They beat Star Wars till it wasn't cool anymore. and then they moved on to the next thing. But it's unfortunate that most people that go to see a comic book movie don't realize that it's the source material is a comic book. You know,
And
the fans of Black Panther don't realize he was created by two Jewish guys.
it's true. And the value. I'm gonna answer my own question on this, or in my own way. The value to me of comic shops, kind of along the lines of what you're saying. People don't know if they see an Avengers movie what that source material is. The value of a comic shop, as opposed to digging around online, is that curation, walking in and saying, "Hey, I saw that Black Panther movie. What's the best way for me to dive into that character? What would you recommend?" Having that person, I think curation is a lost art with music, and it certainly is, I think, with comics. I think someone to kind of guide you and say, "Come, friend, you're in our house now.
Yeah.
Let me show you things." Because otherwise, if you were to see one of these movies for your first time, if you were to watch WandaVision and think, "I think I want to find a Scarlet Witch comic," good luck figuring out where to start on that. But I think the value of a comic shop is helping steer people.
For me, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you feel the same. I mean, comics are a textile thing. I need to have a comic in my hand. I need that feel of it to be able to open it up and to kind of explore the narrative in such a way that, you know, the artist Jack Kirby laid a page out where the panel was meant to move you to the next panel. The page layout was meant to move your eye through it. It was almost like, you know, he was a Renaissance painter with his compositions. You lose a lot of that with the iPad. You lose a lot of that with stuff that's online. And I live in the real world because my kids, my God, it's all about the iPad. You know, it's about, they've moved on from that. But comics are still important because it gets kids to read. I mean, kids don't want to read anymore. Kids just...
That's how I learned to read. I swear to God, Sal, when I was a kid, I think a lot of my reading ability, I think a lot of my vocabulary came from reading comics.
Yeah.
I truly believe
to articulate in your vocabulary. If you're not reading, it's hard to get kids to read nowadays. I mean, anything. Mm-hmm. And that's where in Europe, when you see the way comics are revered over there, they're seen as a true art form. They're seen as a true art. And here there's still that comic book. They think of it as like, oh, it's kind of this. My mother was waiting for me to grow out of it, you know, until I was 40. She's like, when are you going to get a real job? You know, when are you going to, because that just the name comic book, it's, you know, it's for kids or something. And I disagree entirely.
Yeah, I said it earlier in the interview. I'm looking forward to holding the graphic novel and digging in because I've looked at it. I mean, this is exactly what you're saying. I've looked at it as a PDF. I've looked at it on a tablet. For me, I actually prefer reading prose books on a tablet. I prefer that to an actual paperback book. But when it comes to graphic novels and comics, I prefer the OG, the tactile paper-based product.
I don't want to be one of those guys who's like, oh, you can't this way or you can't. I'm like, I get it. If people like to me personally, I can't watch movies on my laptop. I mean, on I see people on the phone watching movies on a plane. You know, I don't get it. I can't do it. I know a lot of people that do, and God bless them. But for me, comics have always been about the printed medium. You know, it's you move through it at your own pace, and it's the page, it's the paper, it's the color. But you know,
and the collector in me, I like having something on the shelf. When it comes to graphic novels, I like seeing all the binding. I like seeing it all lined up. I like seeing Eternals Volume 1, Eternals Volume 2 next to each other on the shelf.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's the collector in me. I like having that stuff to hold after I've consumed it.
I try to turn my kids onto it, and it's like giving a cat a bath, James. They want no part of comics as much as I wish they would, or just lie to me. You know, I mean, my father tried to turn me on to jazz, and I couldn't stand it until I reached a certain age, and then I got it. You know, it was like I understood Charlie Parker, and I understood. But as a kid, sometimes you don't really have, you know, there's something there that doesn't really, you know, you don't get the code of it or something. And all of a sudden, when you get that code, you know, when I was a young kid, I hated Kirby until I couldn't stop reading Kirby. You know, and then I got Kirby, and then he meant everything to me as an artist.
I'm wearing Jack Kirby right now.
He's trust me, we're going to look back at Jack Kirby, you know, like that Woody Allen movie where he's going to be revered as one of the greatest artists of the 20th century.
I can't see how he's not.
You know, he's just, we're going to look back and go, my God, what were we thinking? What were we thinking by not There's not a, you say in the God, like he says in the Godfather, there's not a statue or a plaque of this guy anywhere. There ought to be, because his contribution to the art form is, for me, there was always Kirby and everybody else, because of his exaggeration.
His contributions to the art form and to popular culture. Yeah,
and he teaches you as an artist to exaggerate. To take everything, and it's comics. It's supposed to be twisted. It's not supposed to be perfect. If you draw a spaceship, make it up. I mean, that's what we did when we were kids. You made it up. It was a product of your imagination. I think you don't get enough of that now. Or when I approached the hostage, that's what I stole from Kirby, was just to exaggerate, was just to try to make things larger than life.
I love it. All right. So the hostage is available on Kickstarter right now. It's gorgeous. The story is incredibly engaging. The backstory is super interesting as well. You are not a mainstream comic artist, and that is to your credit. You are an independent spirit with your own distinct flair, style, and method of storytelling, which I think people need to see. So, I love talking to you.
James, I can't tell you how much I thank you for having me on. And I see your rogues gallery of guests, and I'm like, my God, it's like, it's crazy who you get on there.
Occasionally I luck out. It is more of a rogues gallery. It is more Weather Wizard.
Yeah,
Captain
but
Cold.
you're like Johnny Carson. You've got that vibe of Chicago radio from forever. I mean, I still hear your voice, and I still think of Q101, or when I used to stay up late and work, and I'd hear your voice on the radio, and it still resonates. I mean, you could jump in there today and wouldn't miss a beat.
Thank you. That's very nice. But I mean, similar to your situation, and here I always do this. I start to wrap it up and then I go somewhere else. Similar to your situation, you tried to go the traditional big publisher route, but instead you found your own way to make stuff happen for yourself. I'm still in radio. I still do a show on the weekend, but here I am. I'm doing radio on my own terms, basically every night from home.
And why? Well, what's your motive? I mean, to what end? Because you love it. I mean, it's in your blood. You don't really have a choice. I mean, it's what you do. I mean, you have to do it. You're bitten by a vampire,
That's it. I mean, yeah, this is what I mean, you knew from an early age you wanted to be in comics. I knew from an early age I wanted to be around music and wanted to be in broadcasting. So I found a way to keep doing it. If I can't do it full time on a traditional radio station, well, fuck it. I'll do it from home.
Yeah. No, and look, the most important thing is you love it. And you're really, really good at it. So you're always going to have an audience, and you're always going to have people that are going to come and see whatever you do. I mean, I watch your show and I don't even know who you're talking to. And then I find out and I go, oh, okay. And then I'm checking. A lot of times I'm looking up music from guys I don't really necessarily know. And I'm like,
that makes me happy.
Really cool.
That makes me happy.
Cool. The guy from Tomahawk you had on the other night. I have no idea. I mean, I heard, but I remember, from the Metro and Smart Bar and all the years of haunting those clubs. Back, when I was, 100 pounds lighter, and I'm like, you look up guys and you go, man, this guy's great.
That interview in particular, that was Dwayne Dennison. Guitarist from the Jesus Lizard. Tomahawk, his band with Mike Patton of Faith No More, who's also in a million other bands. Dwayne's great. He's a music scholar. He's one of the best guitarists, I swear to God, of the past 30 years. Yeah. So I love that. Like, that's kind of the idea. That's the idea. This goes back to curation, Sal. This goes back to, okay, people may not know who you are, but I hope that the goal in doing these interviews is, I hope that by the time someone's done watching this or listening to it, they think, that guy's kind of interesting. That book sounds kind of cool. Like, the goal is to curate and let people know, hey, I found this cool thing. I hope you like it too.
It's the arts. To me, it's all the same. Music, acting, dance, architecture. For sure. It's all the arts. It's like, I'll explore stuff music wise that I've never heard and find out, hey, this is really cool. And that's why I was so grateful for you, when you just, said you could have me on.
Oh, go on. All
well,
right.
You don't take it for granted. It's just because anytime you've got something that's your baby, it means a lot to you. You don't know you never assume that, everybody else is going to be on board too, because, it's something you got to really, really get the word out.
Yeah. You're more delicate when it's your own thing.
Absolutely. It's when it's your own baby, it's something really personal. You're out on the branch further than if you were just, drawing, the Hulk or something. You're like, it's the Hulk. You know, what
All
are you
right.
gonna do with
Sal Smash, thank you again.
it? Right. That's right.